Hello, my spooky friends. This is John, your host for Dairyland Frights, the podcast that covers everything paranormal, creepy, spooky, and mysterious in the Midwest. And I am joined by another great guest. I don't know what it is, Jeremy. I just keep getting great guests on my show, which is delightful for my audience. He is from Paranormal is the New Normal podcast. Is that correct?
No, it is Paranormal The New Normal. But
Paranormal The New
You're not the first person to make that mistake. So
yeah, like I had someone on and I had a title for his podcast that said, let's talk about ghosts. And he said, no, we need to talk about ghosts. And I said, oh, okay. It's like, it's a little bit of a joke towards talking about ghosts. And I said, oh, okay. So great. So with Jeremy, with your podcast, Paranormal, The New Normal, could you tell my spooky friends, my audience, a little bit about your podcast?
Well, basically, my podcast is just another interview-based podcast about the paranormal, but the difference is between mine and every other podcast out there is mine's 100% about the guest. You will not hear my voice that much on my podcast unless we're having a really good episode and it's just us going back and forth with the bull. But I mean, usually I just let the guests do the talking. I'll ask questions, but I usually let them go into the explanations and just go with it. I'm not going to interrupt them. I'm not going to try to debunk or debate everything they say. It's just, and that tends to be what people love, I guess, because from the comments I've seen about my podcast to where it is in the rankings, people tend to like that, I guess. So I just went with the flow and it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've listened to your podcast. I love the guests you have on there. It's a great podcast. I recommend highly to everyone. I always tell all my guests that I have on here is kind of like my best of the best because I listen to a lot of paranormal podcasts and I try to pick out people who kind of fit what I'm doing as well as have maybe something a little different, something a little bit of a change than the same old that's kind of out there. Because there's so many, and you just gotta, when you're gonna spend your time, you want to listen to someone like Jeremy, that's gonna kind of give you, his guests maybe a different view on things and everything. So yeah, I've been listening to it. It is awesome, and I highly recommend it. So let's get into that. Who has been your favorite guest so far, and why?
Oh, that's always this question I love and I hate because I love to brag about my guests that I've had, but I also, I could pull the whole, they're all my favorites, but I mean,
sure they are.
In all honesty, the answer for this one is always the same answer. It is Mr. Derek Hayes of Monsters Among Us podcast. I got him in my show in the first 6 months of it, and he was the reason I wanted to be a paranormal podcaster, so I kind of was honored to have him on. I kind of fanboyed out in the beginning of it a little bit, but he was a great guest. We had a fun conversation for an hour and a half, whatever it was. I even took off work early that day just to talk to him because he was worth it. I knew he would be. So, I mean, I've had a lot of favorite guests, but to have the man who inspired me to be a podcaster, or at least one of them, that was something.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So let me ask you this. What got you interested in the paranormal other than him? What interested you?
Well, I mean, the paranormal and me have a long history. I got into the paranormal as a kid in elementary school because I was always in the library in the later years of it, and I just happened to find that one book the only book you ever find in the library back in the 90s that had Bigfoot, it had Loch Ness, and then of course aliens, and then at the end there was a little 2-page chapter about what if dinosaurs still exist, and from then on I kind of got hooked. But I mean, I faded in and out throughout my school years. Like it would keep my interest for a while. It got renewed by Monster Quest and Monsters and Mysteries in America and all those great mid-2000s TV shows. That kind of re-invoked it. But then college happened, drinking, girls, all that good stuff. So you kind of fade out of the paranormal for a while because girls don't want to talk about Bigfoot. Well, at least, I mean, nowadays there's more. But But so I basically faded out, and then I discovered podcasts and started listening to Monsters Among Us, Monsteropolis, the Small Town Monsters podcast that no longer exists, and a few others. Stories with Sapphire, Scary Stories. I mean, like there's a lot of them out there. And I fell in love with a select few, and they just made me love it again. They made me fall in love with the paranormal again, especially Monsters Among Us, because it was people, hearing different people's voices telling their own stories that just made me. It's not just some host talking about it for an hour, which is why I would never do that in my show, because I don't want to hear myself talk for an hour about Bigfoot. Why would somebody else?
Right.
So
right. Absolutely. I mean,
that's just where it got me to where I am, and I started podcasting on a completely non-paranormal pop culture podcast, and they said you need to start a podcast of your own about something you love, and I was like, first thing came to mind was paranormal. Like literally, it didn't take a second for it to come to my head. Even it's just like paranormal.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's really great because again, that's where I talked to a couple of people of my guests who were the same way. They're like, yeah, check out books about ghosts, and one of my guests said she tried to summon a ghost. Like she said, I'm in 8th grade. Like, give me a break. I'm trying to, and my mom and a lot of too is parents, right? You grow up in an atmosphere where your parents were probably okay with it, I'm guessing.
I mean, my parents never really were into the paranormal at all. Even being brought up, like ghosts were never a topic. We built our house, so it was never like an old house that had any chance of having anything in it. So I mean, there's still a chance, but it didn't end up having anything in it, I don't think, at least. But I never really had any paranormal experiences until like the last 5-6 years. Like that's when I started having some paranormal experiences. But I mean, my whole childhood, my parents never really talked about it. I mean, the only ghost I knew growing up was the Holy Ghost, and that bored the crap out of me. So.
Right, exactly. So tell me about some experiences that you had recently and, how they affected you.
Well, let's see. I mean, I'll give you my favorite experience first. Okay. I was down at down at a house a little bit south where I live, like an hour and a half south, and it was my now wife then girlfriend's house, and we were outside with the kids, whatever, walking into the house because it was getting dark out, and my son says to me, he's like, "Why are those stars moving?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Stars don't move." And like I look up in the sky, and I'm just like, "Okay, that's not normal."
Yeah.
You can't see stars move with the naked eye normally. And there was a cluster of 8 to 10 star-looking objects moving in the same direction in a formation almost.
Okay.
So that's my favorite experience because it's, I mean, in the area, I live in Massachusetts, and in Massachusetts alone, there's a lot of UFO sightings on a daily basis. So I mean, every now and then you'll see something in the sky, and you'll just be like, that doesn't look right, or that shouldn't be there, I don't think. Right. Like, it's not, it doesn't look like a star. It definitely doesn't look like a plane, because I mean, you listen to Monsters Among Us enough, you know how to spot a plane versus a UFO, but it's just, I mean, I don't know, there's unexplainable things, and I mean, there's rumors that they like to hang out in this area because they use something in our mountains, whether it's the radon or some kind of mineral. I've been told what it is before, but I can't remember at this point, and they use it for fuel or something, they believe. So
that's really interesting. We have that around here, but it seems to be concentrated about the lakes. I live in Wisconsin, so it's around the lakes, and there's been some crazy sightings, and most of them around the lakes. Most of them involved, obviously, in the forest and everything like that, which I find absolutely fascinating. There was a story I did on one of my shows about this. There's this place called Sturgeon Bay, and there was this huge unidentified, or UAP, wherever they're calling them now, where it was floating over this town in the 1950s. And it was like something out of a movie, like this huge object was just floating, and people were just, what is that? What could that be? And, that's what's interesting, right? That's what makes it interesting for everybody to see exactly what could be out there and who's visiting us.
Exactly. I mean, it's a highly debated topic about who it is and or what they are. I should say is more the terminology, but it's I don't know. I have a lot. I have a lot of my own theories, but I also have heard a lot of theories, and it's changed my theory over the years, especially doing a podcast. Like my opinions on the paranormal change on a daily basis at this point.
Yeah. So with that, do you feel you're a skeptic or a believer? Kind of a combination of both. And dealing
It's
with
kind of
ghosts,
fun.
paranormal. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it's kind of funny because in my one podcast I do, Global Strangeness, which is a paranormal discussion podcast with co-host. I mean, I tend to fall more on the believer side, and my one co-host is more the skeptic side, and then my final co-host is kind of like more in the middle of it all. Yeah. So I'm the Fox Mulder, and my co-host Scott is definitely the Dana Scully. But
yeah.
I mean, I like to say I have a healthy degree of skepticism, though. Especially when it comes to ghosts. Like, I am not going to believe every picture I see on Facebook has a ghost in it, supposedly. Right. Like, I'm not going to believe that. No, I mean, or that every picture of Bigfoot is 100% real. Do I believe most of them? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I still am a firm believer that Paris and Gimlin was real, even though people are trying to hate on that and say it's a costume every day now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, and that's the great thing I love about all my guests. We're all like, oh, that's really interesting, but we don't go like, oh, that's real. And it's usually, two kids, screwing around on YouTube with the camera. And, oh, look at that. And you're like, all right. I get it. What's going on? And I don't know if you agree with me on this, Jeremy. Let me ask you this. I feel they ruin it for people like us who want to relate these stories to people. And they're like, oh, no, come on. It's all a joke. Do you agree with that?
I mean, I think there's just too many negative people in the world nowadays. And if they're not part of the community where they're going to believe in it more than anything, then they're just going to try to ruin it for people who do because they don't want to. They think it's silly. They think it's childish, or they just don't have enough happiness in their life where they can look outside what they see in front of their face and think there's more.
Right.
They're plugged in the matrix. They're plugged in the matrix hard, and they're not getting unplugged anytime soon.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I think a lot of people, like some of my guests have brought on too, maybe your guests have said this too. It's about power, right? Like who has the power dealing with whether it be religion, politics? Because if someone came out today and was saying, they could make a ghost, like they could harness the power of a ghost and use it for whatever reason, well, that person would have the power, right? That's what's interesting to me too.
But the question then becomes, can you really harness the power of supernatural beings? I don't think that necessarily can happen. I mean, they can harness you. They can do possession without a doubt. But we've seen examples of that. But I mean, one of my first guests was an author, and I just finished reading her second book. And that actually was what the villainous cult in the book was trying to do, was use ghost power to summon an ancient demon.
Oh, so, okay. How did that work out?
Not well for the cult. Let's put it that way. Her book hasn't even come out yet. I read a beta copy of it because I want to get her back. I'm gonna get her back on my show when it's coming out again. But when the second book is releasing, but it's it's her second book in her series, and her series is amazing. But it's a very religious book too. I mean, it's very Christian based, Catholic based, but I still love it, even though it is just because the storyline's there. The storyline's there, the characters are there, and I want to read more about it. And always, I keep telling her it'll be a movie or TV show within the next decade. I guarantee it.
Yeah, absolutely. Could you share the author's name with my spooky friends so they could check her out?
Oh, of course. The author's name is Brandy Alexander. The first book is called Genesis. I will never know the title unless I look it up, but it's called Genesis. Her name is Brandy Alexander. You could find her pretty easy if you Google her.
Okay.
And the first book is called Genesis, and the second book coming out is going to be called Invocation, or something like that. It's a Catholic word.
Great. Yeah, I just had. I don't know if I haven't listened to obviously all your episodes yet, But I don't know. I've had two practicing witches on, and one of them is a Satanist, and she's totally open about that. But when she started to talk to me about it, is like, it's totally different from what you think. It's not you're in the basement with a pentagram and demons are coming out and stuff. She was like talking about, no, it gives me power to be myself, because she's from the Netherlands. And in the Netherlands, as you know, they have very superstitious, as well here in the States, but very superstitious ways still. That's where black metal was developed, the genre of heavy metal, and, where they burned churches down, and there was a group of people, Lords of Metal. There's a movie out there, and it really put everything in a real, I don't know, bad light. And she's talking about, yes, I sometimes do a blood sacrifice, but it isn't to get a demon. It isn't anything to do with that. It's just to help me gain power, to help people, to help myself, and to live with myself. And, I took Jeremy, I don't know what you think, but that was interesting, right? To hear that different point of view from a guest, that you have one thing, and then they tell you another thing. You're like, that makes complete sense. Have you ever had something like that from a guest?
Well, yeah, I actually have. I mean, when what you described to me just now, to me, that wouldn't have been that unusual, because when I was in high school, I bought the Church of Satan Bible off of, I'm pretty sure it was eBay at the time.
Yeah, I got it too, yeah.
There's nothing in that about trying to summon demons, or nothing I thought would be in it when I bought it, because I was, a metal-loving teenager trying to raise hell. But
yeah.
I mean, it's more about just being yourself and being a good person. So, I mean, I mean, I've been told that's not the real Satanic Bible, and that it's out there somewhere, like kind of almost Evil Deadish with human skin wrapped around it and everything. But until I see that with my own eyes, I can't really say yes or no to that. But yes, I have an experience like the one you just talked about. I had an astrologist on the show, a man of science. And he was also a UFOologist, and he has been studying UFOs he was an older man, so he's been studying UFOs for 40, 50 years probably, if not longer. And I expected a great conversation about aliens and UFOs, and just like what I expected. It wasn't what I expected, because he was apparently also a very religious man, and in his beliefs, UFOs and aliens are demonic, and you get abducted by them if you do demonic satanic things, such as listening to heavy metal, or just basic church no-nos. I mean, premarital sex, all day, like playing D&D. He actually said playing D&D. And I mean, I argued with him as nicely as I could, and I wasn't I wasn't trying to get him to like leave the podcast at that point, but it was just like, like I was just dying for that one to be over. I was like, I can't keep my face straight much longer on this. I can't. So that I mean, that was like kind of an invert of an example of the one you said, because it was kind of different kind of expectations ruined on that one. But that's interesting, because like I said, we've had a number of ghosts. You predominantly have. I've done some episodes by myself. Like you said, I don't like to listen to myself, but oh well. But the guests I've had have ranged, like your guests have ranged from, I've had people from the UK, witches, authors, demonologists, all these people. And what always fascinates me about is, one, they're normal people. Like, they have jobs, and you know what I mean? And they're trying to make a living at this. But what fascinated me most about is they all had similar experiences about the paranormal, all had reasons why they were in the paranormal that are very similar. Does that always surprise you sometimes? Like, you would think maybe they would be a little more, how do you say, crackpot? Because they come in, wow, I saw this. I've never had that. I honestly, I mean, I've had a few guests that were a little more towards what people would call the crackpot like side of the scale. But
really?
I've had a few. And I've had ones where
what did that involve? I'm curious. What did that involve? Them talking about.
I had a guy, I can't remember, Jay something, I think his name was. And the only thing he really had to do with the paranormal was he once had a vision where he believed he was being talked to by the goddess Tefnut of Egyptian culture.
Okay. Yep.
And so he now makes this jewelry that's all based around Tefnut. And the rest of the conversation, besides that 5 minutes about Tefnut, was pretty much all government type stuff and whatnot. So, I mean, that was one. Trying to think of the other one. Oh, I mean, my third guest ever. I can't remember his name for life of me at this point, but I mean, he wrote a book about something called Septemics.
What's that?
And it's basically a way to rank human beings based on how useful they are to society. It sounded very Nazi-like in the way he described it.
Oh, sure.
Another podcaster who I won't mention because I now fell out with him. I fell out with that podcaster a long time ago because he's an idiot. But he even brought this guy in his show to argue with him about Septemics.
Yeah.
So I mean, it set another podcaster off for God's sake. So I mean, this guy just was so self-righteous. Like I mean, he would, and he seemed like he was a very intelligent, very brilliant man, but put to use besides doing something besides ranking humans.
You get a 5 because you're, I don't know, sweeping the sweeping the floor or something.
I mean, his whole system was based on like I think 14 or 15 or something like that scales of like different aspects of humanity, and intelligence was of course one of them. There was a sexual scale. There was an emotional scale. And I mean it just.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, when you firing up the ovens, buddy? Because you're sounding like someone I heard before.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Did you ever have a guest that kind of shook you a little bit? Like them saying something that, and I don't mean like, you know, how do I explain? Like they tell a story and it affected you. Like you're like, wow, you know, crap.
I mean, yeah, you don't mean in like okay, I need to call the FBI type of way, but
right. I mean, like you know, you listen to it and maybe you cried, maybe you had a good laugh, or maybe you were like, "Damn, I'm checking the corners of my house."
There was a woman I just had on my podcast. I just released the episode for it maybe a month ago or so, or a month and a half ago.
Sure.
Her father and her husband are military men, so a lot of her paranormal knowledge came from them, and. She got to a part where she was talking about her father, stories her father told her of velociraptor-looking extraterrestrials fighting in World War II, along with both sides of the conflict, and fighting on a ship in the middle of the ocean against the Germans. And I literally, you could hear it in the recording because I did not take any of it out. I literally didn't say a word for like a minute. I just like stood there, my mouth agape, and I eventually just started like being like, "Are you serious?" Like I lost it for like a good 3 minutes of just unbelievable awesomeness. Like I was just like, "This is the best thing I've ever heard in my life." I would actually believe this to some degree. Like, why would you say this unless it's true? Like I couldn't even think of this. I couldn't even think of this when I was trying to write a story.
Oh my God, that is crazy. That's interesting to me.
There's a lot more in that episode than just that, but that was the oh my God moment to have my mouth open and just be like, oh yes, like this is the type of stuff I wanted on my podcast all along.
Yeah,
groundbreaking stuff.
Right, it's groundbreaking stuff. And the other thing to do with the military is you hear a lot of that, like people who have said. I had a gentleman, one of my guests, tell me, he says, this isn't my story, but it was from what he heard in some relics of history and everything that his grandfather was, that there was in World War I, there was a battle that so far is not in the history books at all. He's tried to research and tried to show me some evidence, but they found a letter from this one private in the British Army. And he said, you know, they were in there, you know, dug in and everything like that. And all of a sudden they look over and they see like this black mist enter the Germans like tunnels, and everything like that. And he's like, okay, they see things because you haven't eaten, it's God knows in these terrible places that in World War I. And all of a sudden, here's gunfire coming from the German side, and everybody hunkers down, thinking they're getting shot at, that there's going to be an attack soon. And all they hear is just gunshots over there, and they're like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And you just hear men screaming and just gunfire and all this stuff, and then it just stops, and it's just quiet. And of course, they sit there and they're like, they don't want to go over there right now, so they wait until morning. And so they get up there and they carefully go over to the Germans, where they're dug in, and they look, and all the German soldiers have fired on each other or have fired in directions they don't know what they're firing at, basically. Like, I guess you could figure that out. And in this letter, nobody knows what it was. Nobody knows how it happened. And the British commanders told him, do not say anything. Do not put this out somewhere. Obviously, he wrote a letter. This is, authenticated letter from like 1917, 1918, whatever, with the war. It's been authenticated. It was in some British museum, which they didn't bring out for years. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy, And he said, yeah. He goes, when my grandfather was reading this and he's related the story to me, I just was like, what do you think it was? I said, I don't know. I have no idea to this day what that miss could have been and why those soldiers just went crazy. Who knows, right? And that's what's interesting in the military, because there's a lot of good stories in there. And yeah, go ahead.
I mean, the Germans were messing with some bad stuff in World War II to begin with, so I can only imagine what they were doing in World War I as well. They like to try to approach the real version of Satanism, at least, and the occult, from what I've read, and they could have unleashed something they couldn't control.
Could be, right? You never know. And that happened a lot in Afghanistan, too, where people said they saw shadow people, they saw a jinn. And if you're not familiar, my spooky friends, what a jinn is, it's basically like a demon, basically, that in Afghanistan, the Middle East, is a very nasty creature or spirit, or whatever you want to say. And the other thing, too, I had someone relate that when they got back from the war and stuff, that's all they would see. Like these jinns, just shadow people, just following them everywhere. And I'm like, have you heard any stories like that where people have said a spirit attached themselves to them, whether it be paranormal investigating, military, whatever it is?
Yeah, I've heard some stories about that from different investigators and different psychics and mediums I've talked to, but the main thing I hear from psychics and mediums I work with is they say that when they go in situations like that, if they are trained enough at the point they're at now, where if something tries to follow them, they always make sure that they are checking before they leave the property, and that they are always doing a cleansing before they leave the property if they think anything is trying to attach itself, because they said they brought things home in the past, and it's hard to get rid of them once they're in your house.
Right.
So
exactly. What is your favorite story? Let's swap stories here. What's your favorite story from a paranormal investigator or a medium that you've had right now or recently?
All right. Well, one of my first 10 guests, it had to be my first 10 guests. He is a actor and writer and director, but he also has, because he writes a lot of paranormal stuff, he's been asked by police to investigate certain things.
Oh, sure.
Christopher Saucy, he had 3 stories from my show about meeting the devil, or as he believes, or hearing the devil in one of them as well.
Okay.
And there's a story he tells in, I believe it's, I want to say Argentina, or God damn it, it's in a South American country when he was in the army. There's a canyon down there called El Canyon de Tio. Him and his troop mates were basically going through this canyon as part of their route. And as they're driving through, they asked their guides, what's with all the graves and all the memorials on both sides of the canyon? And they're like, oh, those are the lives lost to Del Tio. And according to him, it was a lot of graves, like a lot of graves.
Yeah.
And they actually have security points, and this becomes important in the story later on. But they actually have security points at both sides of this canyon because they don't let people go in after night. But basically, they drive through the canyon, and he said it was spooky the whole time. And they get to the other side of the canyon, and there's this, and you can look this up on Google actually because I did. There's a painting on the side of this canyon of the devil, or a form of the devil at least. And it's written next to it, Tio, or uncle. And that's what they call it down there, is Tio. And he said they got through to the other side, got past the security checkpoint, and they were just about to head out to the main road again to get where they need to go before it got dark. And one of his troop mates ran screaming into the canyon. Like they were begging the guards not to shoot, like, don't shoot, we'll get him. And they found him like a half hour, 45 minutes later in a cave in the canyon. And after they snapped him out of it, like he said, he heard like a little girl crying, a little girl screaming. That's why he ran in. They couldn't find anybody or anything, so they started heading out because it was getting dark, and they knew the guards were going to be shutting down the canyon pretty soon. But they start walking out, and all of a sudden the guards put their guns up, and they start shooting in their direction. And they don't know why. They don't know. They're trying to wave, get attention, say like, no, we just passed you, and finally the guards were like, they finally realized the guards were like, come on, and like the guards, they ran past the guards, and the guards like closed off the canyon, and they asked him like, why were you shooting at us? Like, we weren't shooting at you, we were shooting at that. And he said it was the biggest bull he's ever seen, and that it was bright red. Every part of it was bright red.
Oh wow.
And it seemed like the bullets just bounced off it, like it didn't even affect the bull.
Wow.
So he believes that was Tio, because he said in those caves you get like a very dark sense of dread in those caves, and he believes that what his troop mate heard was something trying to call him back into the caves to get him in there as like a sacrifice or something similar.
Right.
And because I mean, I don't know, evil forces do like to mimic voices, we know. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's one thing too, I always tell people, if you're on investigation and a little girl comes up and says, help me, no, get the heck out of there, because that's probably a demon screwing with you. And that's funny because I told that to him. I was just joking with one of my paranormal investigators on the show, and they're like, "You're absolutely right, John. Absolutely right." He goes, "We were at this church investigating, and we heard this little girl's voice." And this is another thing. I don't know if this ever of your guests tell you this too. So they had a new person on the investigation team. So what did the new person do? They started to antagonize the little girl, like, "Oh, I know you're a demon, you're blah, blah, blah." And they were like, "You need to stop right now. You need to stop that." And this guy was like, "Why? I'm just trying to piss it off so we can get some footage, or we can get some, evidence." And he's like, "No, you do not want to do that." And as soon as they did that, and maybe you can relate to the story too, is immediately one of the guys in the crew started throwing up. He just started retching. And they were like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And then another one of the guys in the crew on this team just started like he went like, "Ow, damn it. What the hell?" And he's like, "Oh, my back is burning." And they're like, "Okay, everybody, we got to get out of here right now." And so they got out of there, and the guy with his back burning had scratch marks. The other guy that was throwing up, he stopped. The other guy who antagonized, they kicked off the team, and they told him to leave. Did you ever have a story like that? Anybody relate something like that to you?
Honestly, not really, because I mean,
Well, that's good.
I haven't had actually, I haven't had paranormal investigators on in a long time. Like, because in
okay.
the beginning, that's a lot of what I was getting. So, like, because
Yeah, I got you.
in the beginning, it was a little hard to find guests. Like, but then eventually, it just didn't become hard at all. Now I have so many guests I could reach out to that it's just never ending. Like, I always have. I'm booked out till February at this point. And February's pretty full. So, I mean, I'm gonna be booking in March pretty soon. But I'm trying to remember even because it's been so long since I had paranormal investigators. I mean, it's been a lot more mediums and astrophysicists and astrologists, and I mean, it's been a lot more about that type of stuff lately than.
Yeah.
But actually, well, yeah. Oh, actually, okay. Here you go. Oh, this isn't really. Oh. Well, okay. You mentioned earlier you had a guest who talked about how she got into the paranormal by playing with a Ouija board, trying to summon a demon, basically when she was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I had an author on my show, Damon Manx. Very good horror author, very good paranormal horror author. He does a lot of short stories, and he's written a lot. But when he was a kid, these twin girls that lived next door to him or down the street from him wanted him to play with the Ouija board with them. So the girls started using the Ouija board and everything. He said they were always like creepy. They like the family always was like called the Addams family in the town.
Yeah.
But I mean, when you're a teenage boy and girls all the time with you, you don't say no. So they got the Ouija board out and the girls started playing with the Ouija board and they told them, you are going to die at this age. And lo and behold, he kind of at first he was scared. He said he was scared for a little while, but eventually he got older and it went out of his mind. When he hit that age, he had a widowmaker massive heart attack.
Wow.
And it could have killed him easily, but somehow it didn't. And he's now past the age they said he was going to die at. But he actually ran into them at a high school reunion or something years later, and he told them about the story, and they're like, "Oh my God, we were just playing around. We didn't even know."
Yeah.
It's just like somehow you called something forth that affected my life. So, God, I mean,
oh my gosh, that'd be like, what am I gonna do? So before we get to, I was gonna have a little fun with my audience since this will drop around Christmas time. I thought I could talk a little bit about Christmas and some of the other crazy. How do I say it? It isn't really like Santa Claus in other countries. They're very frightening. Go ahead.
Well, I like to call it either Creepy Christmas or Christmas Cryptids.
There you go. I love it. I love it. But before we get to that, I need to ask you, I know you're not a paranormal investigator like me or anything like that, but I still have 3 spots in mind I would love paranormal, obviously, that I would love to go to, kind of on my bucket list. Do you have anything like that? Have you ever thought of, I want to go here, check this out, and, visit it and see what it's like?
Well, put it this way. I mean, I am a huge Bigfoot fan, so
there you go.
I would love to go to where Small Town Monsters went on the Olympic project and see what I could find.
Yeah.
That's on the bucket list for sure. And the cave systems. I mean, I'm a big proponent of Hollow Earth, and I want to follow some of the cave journeys that Native Americans took on spiritual trips that go through states and states. Like, I would love to be able to try to do that one day. I mean, if as I get older, the less likely that ever will happen. But because I mean, the Native Americans are the only ones that are ever recorded to actually make it from one side to the other. And I would like to see. I'd like to try to figure out why that is, even if it does take my life. I'd like to figure out why that is. If I run into a dog man or a Bigfoot down there, we'll find out what happens. But and then, I mean, other than that, any other place I'd really like to visit is in Europe, Ireland, anywhere in Europe. I mean, because there's so many haunted castles and haunted everything over there.
So much. Yeah, that's awesome. One of the things, Jeremy, I have, I really like, believe it or not, Bobby Mackey's. I want to go to that because, I mean, come on, it's got a portal to hell. It's got satanic stuff. It's got all this crazy demons and stuff that they reported. I just love to go to it. It's like a dive bar. I love dive bars. I thought that might be really fun just to check out because all the craziness and all the investigation that has gone there. And then mostly over to Japan with the Suicide Forest, just because that is not only fascinating to me, but I know this sounds kind of strange, but I would love to help someone because I don't know if you know a lot about it. Are you familiar with it? I'm guessing you are.
Oh, the Suicide Forest in Japan. Oh God, yeah. I've heard a lot of different stories about that place.
Yeah. So they put strings, places to find the dead bodies. Also, people who camp there, they'll put a string so you could go talk to them and maybe talk them out of suicide, and that none of your GPS or anything. I just like to go to it because they have signs out in the front that says basically in Japanese, "Don't kill yourself. Life is worth living." Blah 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 blah. But I'm fascinated with why people choose that place. Like why? You know what I mean? You have a million other places to choose, but you choose that. Why? And why is that so big in Japan? That just fascinates me. I don't know if you have anything to add on that.
I think the reason so many people have taken their lives in that forest is because I think that forest calls them there. I think it's
right. Yeah, but why?
Almost like if you're that depressed, and I think something ancient in that forest can sense it and it calls you in.
Right. But
what? It's. I mean, I am a big believer in ancient civilizations, gods and goddesses they worshipped, and Japan has a lot of those. So
a lot.
I don't know their names by heart because it's been a while since I listened to my favorite one of my two favorite mythology podcasts. So, but I don't really get a chance to listen to podcasts anymore with the job I have now, unfortunately. But I've heard of different evil Japanese ancient entities that easily could have taken that forest and made it their home.
Yeah, obviously. And then my last is like yours with Europe. I've seen a number of different castles. I had a couple of my coworkers stay in some of the most creepiest and haunted castles in Ireland. She told me, because she was going to come back with all this evidence for me, and she's going to go, "Hey, John, look at it." And she's like, "Nope, sorry, John." I said, other than it was cold, damp, and really, she said in some places I kind of felt a little bit of dread, but nothing. And we went on all the tours, and I didn't get scratched, and my husband was like, "No, nothing." And they're both paranormal, like us, a little paranormal. They're like, "Yeah, I was really kind of bumming out."
If you haven't had her on yet, on Global Strangers a couple months ago, we talked to Helena B. Scott. She's an author. She lives over in Scotland, and she has investigated a lot of Scottish ruins and castles, and including the most haunted castle in Scotland, and she has caught some great stuff. So yeah, that's. I mean, she's on all the social media, so you could always find her. Helena B. Scott. She's easy to find.
Nice, great. I'll have to look her up and get her on there. Awesome. So, Jeremy, we're gonna do a little Christmas cryptid stuff really quickly while we wrap up here, and we're gonna start with the big guy, Krampus from Germany. He is through specific. I'll read a little bit about him. So if people are like, "Oh, I never heard of Krampus," which is, I can see why some people might not hear Krampus. But Krampus is through specific origins of infamous beast are unknown. So we're not really sure how he started. He's the opposite of Saint Nick. He's half goat, half straight up horned demon. This European legend loves to devour children around the holidays who have misbehaved. And a turn of additional terror, there are notable celebrations, yes, you can see them on YouTube, folks, intended to honor, Krampus, such as the Krampus Run, although it was canceled in COVID-19. who are participants dressed in elaborate, expensive costumes and descend upon the Munich Christmas market. So it's pretty funny. You can go on YouTube and see this. You see a bunch of dudes and women, whoever, kids, dressed up in this Krampus thing, and they go running. And it's pretty elaborate. Krampus, by the way, is a German word that translates, of German origin, translates to claw. So Krampus, the big one, you've heard of it, probably. Anything to add about Krampus?
I love the idea of Krampus. It's a great way to get your kids to listen, because Santa doesn't really do it anymore. So tell them that there's going to be a big half goat, half demon coming to take them, put them in a sack, and beat them with a stick. Like, it's a little more intimidating than the old, oh, you're going to get coal in your stocking. So I mean, it's actually fun. It's actually funny you wanted to bring this up, because this Friday night I'm actually doing the part 1 of the holiday horror bracket on my podcast.
Nice.
34, I think, different holiday horror movies. So
nice.
And there's a lot of the best Krampus movies not in this part, but I mean there are a lot of Krampus movies in this part as well. The best Krampus movies would be the first part, of course, because the one with Adam Scott and the other bald guy. I can't remember the name of. But
right.
That's the best Krampus movie by far. I love that freaking movie. But I mean, anything Krampus is always awesome. I mean, I find it hard and hard to think that people wouldn't know who Krampus is nowadays, with like all the publicity Krampus gets every year now.
Yeah, he's
almost
more
as big as it's as big as Santa Claus at this point, with the internet really showing how the Europeans celebrate Krampusnacht. Krampusnacht. Yeah.
So I pronounce this probably bad. I'm a mushmouth, but that's okay. A Grilla in Iceland. Okay, she is pardon me? How you pronounce it?
I said Grilla. You got it right.
All right. Another terror to youngsters, Ogre Grilla, has been around since the 13th century and is said to have children who are trolls herself. 13 children, to be exact. So she had a bunch of kids. They're trolls. They have creepy names. Like, I don't think this is creepy, but okay. Pot Scraper. Okay. Door Slammer. Anyway, these Yule lads, as they're called, emerge from a cavernous home to assist their mom, who also ventures out of said cave in rounding up naughty children to eat and who are annoying. They live up to their above-mentioned names, like Door Slammer, over the 2 weeks leading up to Christmas, because they'll slam doors and people will be like, oh, it's Grilla, and it's Door Slammer. Here's a fun fact for you. One variation of Grilla's tale mentions she has a husband, Lep Lottie, who is lazy and just hangs back in the cave while she ventures out in her offspring. So anything, a lazy husband sitting on the lazy boy, whatever. You go torment people. Anything about Grilla? Anything you want to bring up?
I mean, you basically covered it perfectly. I mean, the Yule lads I really like. I mean, they're freaking great, and the Yule lads are creepy, but I gotta say the creepiest children in the creepy Christmas area are always going to be the changelings.
Yes, absolutely.
And I just watched a movie about a month ago, A Christmas Horror Story, and it's literally just three. It's a Krampus story, it's a changeling story, and I think a ghost story, all put in like one movie, with all narrated by William Shatner, which is the great thing.
Oh, William Shatner. I love it. They can't go better with the Shatner. All right. So this one is from Wales. And again, the prime mispronouncing that. But Mary Lewid, I believe. I probably.
Mary Lewid. Mary Lewid.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is the textbook definition of nightmare fuel. And I'm sorry for providing that here. However, that iconic holiday tradition, which is said to be derived from some sort of religious rite, likely pagan, in the early 1900s, simply could not be left off the list. This celebration takes place around Christian Christmas time, and involves Welsh residents donning horse skulls. Yes, you heard me right. Or placing a horse skull on a stick and heading door to door, singing to homeowners. There's a silver lining to this terror, though. If you encounter a horse skull on your doorstep, congratulations. You are the receiver of good luck, Jeremy. So basically, put a horse skull on. They go around singing, and but it's okay. If you get this on your doorstep, you got good luck. anything to add on that?
I mean, I love that one. Actually, I just actually did that Pacific cryptid I just did in our Creepy Christmas episode of Global Strangers this year a couple weeks ago. So I just was reading about that one a few weeks ago because I was like the brush up on what we were talking about, and it's creepy. It
is very creepy.
Europeans. One thing I can guarantee you is Europeans have the best behaved children because they don't have to scare the living shit out of them. So
you damn right. Now, this one is my favorite, and I don't know why. Hans Trapp, or Trapp of France. Okay, so all the classics tale of a man selling his soul to become rich in the 15th century. So we've heard that before, right? Sell your soul, become as a legend has its time around once greedy M. Trapp did so. The Catholic Church got word of it. So he basically sold his soul. The Catholic Church got word of it and stripped him of his wealth and exiled him from society. So M. Trapp here, lonely and mad, lived out the rest of his days in a cabin high in the mountains somewhere in the Alsace-Lorraine. And then one day, a small boy came by his dwelling, and a hungry, unstable, I think he's unstable, Trapp cooked him for dinner. As fate would have it, before he could dig in and eat the little boy, Trapp was struck by lightning and killed. His story lives on as a form of boogeyman-like tale that sometimes he returns to civilization on Christmas, going door to door in search of another meal. Now, also with this too, some people have said he dresses up like a scarecrow, and then little kids are walking by, hey, look at the scarecrow, and then he grabs them and eats them. Kind of the same thing. So anything about Hans Trapp or Trapp?
I've heard of this one, but it's not one of the ones I'm really 100% positive of. So I don't know what to think of it. Really, I really don't. It's just it's
eating kids.
I mean, the best European folklore creatures eat kids. Yeah. Come on now, so the best Japanese ones.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. So that's what scares you, right? You know, you can say you get coal. You're gonna get a bunch of coal in your stocking. Or, hey, there's a guy gonna catch you and he's gonna eat you. Oh. Well, okay, Dad. I'll take out the garbage.
I'll tell you what all these creatures need. All these creatures need some Bill Goldberg Santa to come kick their ass and freaking show them who's boss.
There we go. Love it. So the next one is Colic Contaurus. Eastern Europe. This one I've never heard of. But from late Christmas to early January, this werewolf-like creature reportedly comes out from this underground tonight to play and generally cause trouble. After they had their fill of mischief, they return to their homes at the center of the earth. There comes your hollow earth. Rumor has it that leaving a colander on your doorstep is the best practice to ward them off. Fun fact, this thing can only count to 2. And I have no idea, Jeremy, why that's a fun fact. But this Calic Contaurus can only count to 2. I have no idea why that is.
It reminds me of the old thing, the old legend they had for actually it's for the Rougarou, and it actually might tie into this because the Rougarou, if you throw I believe it's rice on the ground, it'll have to stop and count it.
Yes.
So I mean, all werewolf, all dogman legends tied together somehow. So that's why dogmen are real, because there's so many legends that are all the same.
Yeah, absolutely. So Iceland is back on the list again, Jeremy, with the Yule cat. So the Yule cat, again, Iceland has no shortage of Christmas terrors, and the Yule cat is certainly a force on this list to be reckoned with. In short, the Yule cat is a giant cat who punishes people for not working hard. Legend has it that this palatial whiskered animal once roamed Icelandic countryside looking for those, especially children. Here we go again, children, be careful. Around the holidays who have not received clothing or done their chores. For a little more context, these kids who have worked hard throughout the year were treated with fresh garments, so fresh clothes, just before the new year. And those, again, who were deemed lazy, their Yule cat feeds off their laziness, literally. So there you go for your kids. My kids are too old to believe this, but who knows? If you have younger kids, maybe you can use that.
My one co-host actually, with his youngest son, he does the 12 nights of gifts like the Yule lads would leave.
Yeah.
So I mean,
it's awesome
for young kids. It's fun. I don't have the patience or time to do all these types of traditions, but I mean, I'm a busy man.
That is great. Oh boy! And just to let you know, this is crazy to me. So in Iceland, they actually use the Yule cat as a driving force for employers to ensure their workers meet their quotas. So really, do you really? Can you imagine that you're at work? Oh, I'm trying to get this done. Hey, John. Yeah, you don't get that done, there's a giant cat gonna eat you. What? You mean like a lion or a tiger? You have a lion and tiger in here? Well, no. Like what? I find that hilarious. So the next one is actually a witch. So we had to get witches in here, right? You can't have Christmas without a Christmas witch. Frau Perchata. She's in Austria. Yep, thank you. Austria, Germany. Thank you. A witch who calls the Austrian mountains home. So she goes on a little vacation, so to speak, every 12 days of Christmas to murder via disembowelment those who have been bad. Alternately, if they're on the good list or good side, people living in the area where Frau is, she scours and wakes them up with silver coin at some point and gives them like a little bit of silver coin, I guess. In a plot twist of sort, Pachata is celebrated by fearless fairy tale fans in some village who don mask as a part of a celebration, kind of similar to the Krampus thing. And they have like a really celebration about this witch and everything. And I just thought that was just really interesting because disembowel, that's a new one.
What can I say?
No?
Yeah, I mean, I love Frau Perchta, I really do. I mean, it's just, yeah. I mean, you basically covered it. She's right up there with Santa Claus in my mind for this time of year with the lore. I mean, and she actually was just, was it her or another witch I'm thinking of for Christmas? But I believe it was Frau. Actually, no, it's Frau Perchta. They just covered her on the Santa Claus second season. The second season of the Santa Claus is on Disney Plus.
I didn't see that one.
Apparently, she lives in the North Pole next to Santa Claus.
There you go. All right, makes sense, I guess. So, last but not least, Norway has to get in on this. They have the Nisa or Nissa, I believe it's called. And Nisa, the Nisa, okay, is known as, I believe, Tomte. I'm not Norwegian. I'm not really sure. In Sweden, which is basically what we think of as a little gnome. A tiny bearded man wearing a red cone-shaped hat. In the year 1200, a Swedish man found a 6-inch tall wooden statue depicting one in a fisherman's house in Norway with the word saying, so he found this little kind of gnome thing and said, Nissa. I'm not even going to try to read this, but anyway, had words on it and translated to Nisa correct size. And I don't know why that means, but they like to stay around farms and help with chores. So that's great. In return, they request a bowl of porridge with butter on top. And if they don't get it that way, we'll wreak havoc. So when they get no butter on their Christmas porridge, there's a tale about a girl putting butter on the bottom of the porridge instead of the top. And when this Nissa first saw this porridge, he got upset and killed the farm's best cow, then came back to eat the porridge. So, buddy, I don't know what you're doing. Upon discovering again that they gave him some porridge again, and this time again, they put it on the bottom. Like, figure it out, people. He then stole the neighbor's best cow. But here's a nice thing. So he ate the cow, then he stole a cow. But then he felt really bad because he got the porridge. And this time everything was right. And they put it on top with the butter on top. So then he stole another cow and gave it to the neighbors, the cow he killed and stole or something to that effect. It's not really scary. It's more like cow stealing. I don't know. So I don't know what you think about that. Norway is kind of different. Okay.
Oh, Norway has a lot of great cryptids. They really do.
It does, right?
Their folklore is amazing as well. But I mean, this just to me, the Nisas always sound to me like just a short person with some anger issues because they're short.
Right. Yeah.
Short man syndrome. I mean, my dad had it.
And that's really all of the ones. I just did some basic ones. Anything you want to add off of that? You said you have spoken to people and done anything else scary, other countries that they do, maybe have a different cryptid or whatever.
I mean, you got most of the ones I could think of off the top of my head. It's been a little while since I did this, but I mean, the changelings are definitely the creepiest, I think, because I mean, the fact that they, especially on Christmas, like to take the place of your children, and then they will, if you try to stop them from doing what they want to do, they will kill you in the process.
Yeah, that sucks. That really sucks. Oh, by the way, where do you stand on black-eyed children? Where do you stand on that, or dark-eyed children, I should say?
Well, I mean, there are black-eyed children, then there are white-eyed children, has been coming out in recent years.
Yeah,
encounters with those have started to come out. It's believed the white ones control the black-eyed ones somehow. It's all very Children of the Cornish, but yet the stories of them go back longer than Children of the Corn was a thing. So I feel like they have to exist. I've heard enough stories about them from people from the source's mouth, and it's just like, I don't know what to tell you, but it sounds creepy as shit, and I don't ever want to run into one, and I never let one in my house.
That's the key. Don't ever let them in your house, your car, wherever you are. Just
they're like vampires. Don't let them in your house. Do not give them permission to enter.
Absolutely. See, that's some great stuff for the holiday season because you never know who's going to show up, right? You have a Christmas party and who's that guy? Or wait a minute, I didn't think there's supposed to be kids at this party. Oh man, now you did it. Awesome. So Jeremy, why don't you tell my spooky friends, my audience, what you got coming up? What are you excited about here for the new year and the rest of the year?
Well, like I said, this Friday, the 22nd, we'll be doing our first part of our holiday horror movie bracket. And nice. I'm strongly looking forward to that because I've been watching a lot of holiday horror movies that are some good, some horrible, but I've been watching them all.
Yeah.
I still got a good 10 to go, but I'm not going to get through them all by Friday. I already know that, but I'll get through the ones I feel like I should watch. And then coming up in, guessing either the end of January or the beginning of February, we're going to be doing the next bracket that got picked by the random wheel. picked by my participants is the 80s Alien movies bracket.
Ooh, good one.
44 different Alien movies from the 80s. So it's going to be an interesting bracket. And we'll have another one coming up after that, but that won't be decided till this Friday. So I can't even say.
Oh, man. That sounds awesome.
I just make all these different categories into brackets, and I let my participants choose what they want to put in the wheel to get, at the end of the episode to get picked. So
love
you got to know months in advance. You got to know months in advance because there's so many movies to watch. But
love it. That sounds awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeremy. I could talk to you for hours. We seem to have a nice little spooky friendship here. We both like to have our guest on and have tell some great stories as well as see some good Christmas horror movies and some great alien movies. So anytime you want to be back on, great. I'd love to have you back on. If you ever need me to be on your show, I can tell you a story about Ed Gein and Jeffrey Dahmer. They are not my personal stories, but they are good friends of mine who have dealt with two of the worst serial killers in the world, basically, or pretty damn close.
We will make that happen. I guarantee you. We will make that happen.
Please. So, after the first year, send me something. I would tell these stories. You'll love them. They're just they're just crazy. Like you be like, you can't believe them. And then you're like, nope, here's my people I can bring on to tell you that they're all true. So awesome. So to wrap up the show, we always say two things. One, say hi to your ghost. Hello, ghost. Because you never know, right? You might have a ghost in there. And then stay spooky. So thanks, Jeremy.
My pleasure.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.
Hello, friends. This is John, your host from Dairyland Frights and Packers Blitz. And I want to tell you, I've been using Ollie2 for my podcasting for over a year now, and I love it. And if you're looking for an easy and convenient solution for creating podcasts, Ollie2 is definitely worth checking out. It's a great tool for podcasting beginners and professionals alike who want to make their creation process easier and faster so they can focus on other areas of their show. And I use it for editing, and I love it. I can edit something really quickly and get my show out there and get it to my audience. So please try Ollie2. You can try it a week for free. They have a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you really have nothing to lose. And like I said, I love Ollie2. Check it out, and you'll love it.